Thank God we're gay. Like, thank whatever it is in the universe that made us gay, because the life of a heterosexual is a sick and boring life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Parallel Drives, a bi-monthly podcast where we talk about our friendship, our past, our journey, everything in between. I am one of your hosts, Joe DeLue II, and I am here with my best friend, James Vincent. Hi, James.
Hello.
Hi, how was your last 2 weeks?
Oh, it was very Groundhog Day-ish because I'm still in quarantine.
Oh,
Well,
as
no, I actually am back at work and stuff, but I mean.
I did see a little sequined eye that you did, so
Oh,
um,
that was from a long time ago.
oh, was it?
I'm just reposting old content.
I wasn't sure, and I was like, I don't remember seeing this before, and I knew that you were back at work, so I thought it was something new because you were with Aura, right?
No, that was a long time ago.
No.
It was like in January, but I did get yelled at by someone because I posted a photo without a mask on, and people were like, "You're so stupid," and I was like, this photo is 11 years old. Like, I wish that I still
Oh,
looked.
the one like I think I remember seeing it. And I was like, oh, that's from a long time ago.
Yeah, I had like a really short beard or so,
Yep.
and yeah, I was like, I wish I still looked that good if I did this.
And cut your beard really short.
Yeah.
Just wore like if we both wore lots of face tapes.
Yeah. Like multiple sets of face tapes.
I just need like 5 sets of face tapes, and then I'll be back to what I used to look like
I
back.
just need like surgical needles and I'm gonna tie them back. Or
Mhm.
the bandana. The bandana really kind of worked that week that I did the
You
bandana.
could be like Catherine Hellman in Brazil and just like
Yeah.
pull it back.
Yeah.
Well, so
So
now that we've gotten over that, so this week, the our Blue Plate special is something that I think is really interesting, and it was brought up in after our last podcast, as a lot of our topics for the next podcasts are. Um, and it's something that was very, very big when we were growing up, and especially because we both grew up Catholic.
yes.
So this was something that was like right up there in front of us all the time. And so for the Blue Plate special, we are going to talk about briefly uh, cults and Satanism.
Satanic panic.
Satanic panic. So it seems like in the 70s, there was just a lot um, around Satanism, around cults. I don't remember any cults in particular from that time. I know all the cults now, but growing up, I don't really remember who the cults were at the time. I know there's Charles Manson, which had just happened, and the Tate murders,
And
but
the Moonies. Like, remember, like, everybody talked about the
the
Moonies.
Moonies, and then Jim Jones was the big one
Jim
during.
Jones was big, but we were like young then. We were like
Yeah,
5. I was
you
5.
were 5, I was 7.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until later that like I know all of the names, but
Yeah.
I do the thing that always stuck out for me was the Satanism, and I think that was because we were both raised in Catholic families, and
Yeah.
we went to church every Sunday, and it was a really, really huge, huge thing
We
with the church at the
we
time.
also both went to Catholic school.
Yes,
So it was like not just Sundays for us. It was like
every day.
every day. Every
Every
day.
day was Sunday. Yeah, I remember my 5th grade teacher, Sister Clara, would have these like really, really graphic paintings. I mean, there were prints of paintings, obviously, but she would hang them up, and she had them for different times. I don't know if it's different weeks. I can't remember if it's different weeks or different months. A new
Like
one
the
would go up.
liturgical calendar.
It wasn't I don't think it was that, because they were big and they would hang over the closet door, and they were always super, super graphic. They're like old paintings, depicting like hell and the 7 deadly sins, and like just like people being tortured in hell. And yeah,
Like,
That's okay.
why would you put that into a fifth grade classroom?
Who knows? She also hit kids
Yeah, it was a
constantly,
different
so
time. It
they
was a
could do that
different time.
sometime.
I I remember Satanic Panic, but I also was obsessed with witchcraft and obsessed with like Greek mythology and all the things that you weren't supposed to be obsessed with. So I loved those things. But I remember like one time I was at the mall with my cousin Gina and we were like hanging out in front of Caldor and someone was like, "Hey, you kids like music?" And we were like, "We love music." And I probably had on like a Frankie Goes to Hollywood shirt. Like I don't remember how old I was. I was really young. And she's like a year older than me and we loved like whatever it was that we listened to. And so they invited us to this teen dance, and we were like, yay. And I remember like prepping ourselves, like being like, okay, if they ask about rap, we like Run DMC. If they ask about whatever. And she was really into like Motley Crue and Yngwie Malmsteen. I must have been in fifth or sixth grade because I was really into like Duran Duran and Madonna. And then we got to the dance, but it was like 1985 or something, 80, however old I was, 87. And so we got dropped off and we were supposed to get picked up when it was over. And we went inside and it was like a Christian thing where they like talked about like Satanism and music and like they kept playing records backwards. Like another one bites the dust going like, it's fun to smoke marijuana.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, if you look at the Duran Duran album cover, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, there's the crescent moon and like all these things. And anything that was supposed to turn us off from the music was like, this is why we like this music. And these people were crazy. And we couldn't get out of there fast enough. And I feel like that pushed me towards the occult because the people who were against it were all such tedious nerds that I was like, I am ready to burn in hell if it means hanging out with these boring people.
I know, and so funny that you remember like in school you would have to sell like gift wrap
Yeah.
and cards and things like that at certain points, and if you sold a certain amount, you would get these points, and then you would go through the catalog and decide what you wanted to get.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I got my first Dungeons and Dragons set. Speaking of nerds, and my parents were totally fine with that. They had no problem with it. It was such a weird
I am shocked.
yeah, they had no problem with it. They had no problem with me playing the game. I played with my friends. But I remember being a really young kid, and I can't like really young, like it had to be like first or second grade, I would assume. First, second, or third grade, somewhere around there. And we had like there was a whole thing where everybody was invited to the church hall so that these people could talk to us. Might have been a priest, might not, I can't remember, but they would talk to us about Satanism and the occult, and did a whole slideshow. And I remember them talking about the Hotel California, and they did the same thing. They played Another One Bites the Dust backwards, and they're like, okay, we're gonna play this
Smoke
backwards.
marijuana.
What do you hear? And you're like,
I
and
just smoke marijuana.
nobody knew what it said. And then they said, oh, it says it's fun to smoke marijuana. And then they play it, and of course you're like, oh yeah, of course I can hear that because you just told me I can hear that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy. And then the life-changing moment for me was when I was like 8 or 9, there was a movie of the week, which I lived for movies of the week. Like when I was like an old woman. Like at 7 or 8 years old, I would like get candy cigarettes or straws and just pretend they were cigarettes and pour myself some ginger ale and pretend it was whiskey. And I wish I would always wanted one of those snap cigarette cases. And I would sit down in front of my stories or maybe the movie of the week. And when the newspaper would come in on Sundays, I would go through the whole TV guide and
Yep.
see what I had to watch. And there was a movie called Midnight Offerings. And it was like Melissa Sue Anderson from Little House on the Prairie and Mary Elizabeth. McDonough from like the Waltons or something, and Patrick Cassidy, and then like the mother from Soap, and like
Was that
Marion
Catherine Hellman?
Ross. What was it?
Wasn't Catherine Hellman?
Catherine Damon. It was Catherine Damon.
Catherine
And,
Damon.
and Marion Ross. And like
Yes.
it was all like the TV, like Gordon Jump from WKRP in Cincinnati, but it was about teen witches.
Yep.
And like Vivian, the bad witch, was like the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter. And then like Robin was also the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter, but her mother died, so she didn't know. So she was just discovering her powers. But then they had like the ultimate witch showdown in the wood shop.
I'll get right to the point, Robin. No use wasting a lot of time on this. I want you off this campus. I was here first. Ocean is my school.
Now it's mine, too.
I think you'll like it better at Wilson.
I don't think so. I like it here just fine.
You're not staying, I can promise you that. Leave now and we won't have to get bloody about it. It's up to you.
Forget it.
Which I always wanted to go to a school that had a wood shop, but Catholic schools just didn't do that.
I do not know.
And I just knew that it was like, I am going to be a teen witch. And then all these teen witch movies just kept happening. And so I completely embraced the satanic panic. Like I was totally into it. It was probably very formative in my life. But I think also I also went through this phase where I wanted to be a priest, but I also really loved the occult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's something that's really appealing about the occult in a way. I think it's like this sort of
Outsiders.
yeah, and I think also because I love fantasy,
Yeah.
I loved mythology, so like it really appealed to me because I always wanted to have magic. I always wanted to be, a wizard and have
Me
magic.
too. I still pretend like in a strong windstorm, I'm like, oh, I just whistled up that wind. I'm casting spells constantly. Sitting by me right now at my desk is both a cauldron,
A mini
a collection of herbs and twigs that I'm making into incense, and more crystals than one person should ever own.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think what else is super witchy that's here. Oh, I've got my sympathetic magic figure candles.
Is that what that is?
Because so if you want to do sympathetic magic, like say I want to do a love spell,
Yeah.
and I want to do some chakra healing or heart healing for a friend, or I want to bring love into my home, or I want to bring money into my home, I can use a sympathetic magic. So this will be representative of the person. Some people also use it for other things too, like if someone's gossiping about you or things like that. Like here's a little gossip spell that I put together with clove.
Why is someone gossiping about you?
Yes, someone was saying some very vicious things about me. So I did a little spell to stop the gossip, and then I froze them. They're still in my freezer. It's been months.
Oh, nice. It's funny because also because you talk about like the TV movie of the week, but like at that time we had so many movies that were about the occult and Satanism and all kinds of things like The Omen and like the supernatural, like Poltergeist and the Amityville Horror and what's the big one? She turns her head around.
Exorcist.
Exorcist. Like it was such a big thing in the 70s to like everybody was focused on this. And I wonder if part of it came from like some of the cults, from the 60s.
I'm sure. I also have always wanted to be a cult leader. Like I feel like when Armageddon happens or this fascist regime takes over the country, that my only survival skill is that I would be a good cult leader. I have no other skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's always appealed to me because, I've always loved that sort of like tribal aspect. I've always wanted to belong to this like tribe. And so there's something about these things, like when I was watching Wild Wild Country, which was about Rajneesh or Osho,
Depending on who you talk to.
depending on the time that you were with him, what he was called. But like I was watching it and I was like, this is at heart, I was like, this is actually kind of cool. Like you want to create this self-sustaining, you know, place where these people can live, where they can have these beliefs, they can grow up free, like everybody was welcome.
And I love a sex cult.
And sex, but and sex. But then you start to watch it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not too sure about that. Like the things that they would have to do, like they would have to, like first they would start with breath work, but it was like this really like intense breath work, and then they would like for a long period of time, and then they would have to scream for a long period of time,
Yeah, that's what you do with breath work.
and then they would wait, and then they would have to jump and say who for a really long time, and then they had to be silent.
I think the thing with me in a cult is that it's the same reason I could never join like a fraternity or a gang. Like I just don't want to do what everybody else is doing or look how everybody else looks. Like even my friend group has started to look very similar. Like we all dress very similarly, and I'm like, why are we all dressed alike? It's very
I'm lucky I will never have that here.
no. You, Mrs. Roper, with all your caftans.
I know. That's what I felt like. I also felt like Mrs. Roper with my caftan this past weekend. So that leads perfectly into our next topic, which is finding your voice. So James, would you like to lead us off in this one?
Yes. Finding your voice is a topic that I think is so important for me, and I speak about it with artists all the time, the idea of finding your voice, finding your signature style. And I was thinking after our last few episodes where we told our coming out stories and kind of how we got started as makeup artists, I thought a great next step, whether you're a makeup artist or whether you're someone who's just kind of finding your footing in the world right now or figuring out what next steps look like for you, the idea of finding your own voice and being able to speak your own truth, to find your signature, I think is so essential. And I think for the two of us, it has been such a process of figuring out who we are and kind of getting there.
Yeah. No, and I think it's very important. And I think, you know, finding your voice and finding your signature style in your job, you know, is important. And then I also think finding your voice, and maybe not finding your signature style, although that's always really nice too in your personal life, but finding who you are in your personal life, I think is really important too. And finding those things out, because I don't feel like I found out, I think I knew what my signature style was in makeup. I think I got lost along the way and then refound it. We can talk about that, but I also think I didn't find my voice for myself until I was in my 40s. And I think that was a long journey as well. So why don't you talk about finding your voice in your work first?
I think, you know, for me, finding my voice, I made some notes. I made some notes because I think for me, this is something that's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when I talk about it, I tell a lot of stories. And I wanted to make sure that as we're covering this topic, that it isn't just about me, but really this urge for people to put in the work and to trust their ownness, to be able to say my voice is essential and it needs to be heard. I think I spent so much of my early life in silence. I was very quiet. I was very shy. And I think I missed a lot of opportunities because of that. Even when we met, I don't know if you remember, like when I started college, I was very quiet, and it came across like that
Except
I was.
during rehearsals when you just could not stop talking, and I had to like chastise you as your
After that was when I started finding my voice.
student.
For me, I think it was this process of like not fitting in, not feeling like anyone was listening to me, not feeling like I could share a lot. I think I also, as a gay kid, you've got so many secrets. So the more you say, the more that might be exposed. And so I was very quiet. And then I had like a nervous breakdown. And I was like a freshman in high school, and I would do all this weird things like break my fingers and jump downstairs and do things to like get out of gym. And so because it was a Catholic school, they said I either had to go into like Bradley Children's Hospital, or I had to do a weekend retreat.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we
We
talked
talked
about
about this in one of the previous podcasts too. Yeah.
and
And you
that was like
work,
the
right?
first time that someone really listened to me and really kind of let me be myself and talk to me about like what does leadership look like, and what does why is it important to share your story, and why is it important to connect to people. And it was like this permission to kind of start stepping into being myself. And then it was probably decades of like putting in the work and figuring out the why, the who. Why did I see things the way that I did? Who was I? Who did I want to be? And where did I want to be? And what did I want to be? And I think that that self-discovery is so essential for any artist or any person to being fully realized. And I think that it was more important for me, I think, because there's that gift of queerness where you don't necessarily have to follow what is expected.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know what was available to me. And then in my artistry, it was kind of a mimic for so long because I didn't know who I was. So if you don't know who you are, how can you create something that is special? And so I did a deep dive, and I did a lot of work, and I really kind of pulled out parts of myself and did some of the tough work to being able to speak my truth and deciding like this is who I am, this is what is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that process is something that I try and bring my artists to, like studying and learning and being open to experiences and being aware of everything around you and kind of taking it all in, and then doing the work to figure out what is important to you, what do you want to say. That I think is like for me the first step to becoming that voice. And that's in our industry, it's the only way you can be successful. If you do not have a signature style or a voice, like if you only do the same makeup that everybody else is doing, what makes you the special person that I need to hire? And so then that became a driving force as well. And then it really kind of inspired me to take other artists through the process. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, for me starting out in the industry, and we talked about this too, was because you said you should apply for MAC and you should, be a makeup artist. And even when I got the job, and I was just a cashier to start off with, but when I finally started doing makeup and being one of the managers, I still didn't know what I wanted. Like I was like, well, I was just sort of going with the flow. Like I was like, okay, this is what's happening now. Oh, I'm the third key. Okay, great. Now I'm the assistant manager. Okay, great. Now I'm the manager of the pro store. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Like now I'm doing this body painting event. Now I'm doing this. Like it just sort of happened, and I just sort of let it go. And at that time, I guess that's what I needed. I didn't need to do a deep dive into it because this was my life, and I had the security of having a full-time job and having my benefits and having everything that I needed, and living in New York. It was really great at that time. And so I didn't really need to find who I was until that point when the company of Mac changed.
Right.
Started to become more corporate and stopped becoming as artistic, you know, and then it was like, well, this isn't what I want. You know, I don't want to be someone who's just punching out numbers, who's just trying to get numbers. You know, what I loved about Mac was the artistic part of it. So then I had to figure out, well, what is it that I need? And then I just quit and left and moved out to LA, you know, and then I was in LA and I was like, I'm going to do film and television. And I kept doing that. And it was at that point that I started the journey of like, okay, who am I going to be? What is my voice? Where I actually started investing the time in figuring out what it was that I actually wanted out of it. And then, you know, and then fell into designing for theater and really fell into it. It wasn't, I didn't pursue it. I didn't think it was actually a career that you could do.
Well, so few people design for Broadway.
Yeah, because there's not a whole lot of, and especially then there weren't a whole lot of shows that would hire makeup designers, and so, and even now there's not a whole lot of shows, or they don't want to pay. So you know, it's still few and far between. But I just never thought that would be a part of my career, and because I had done theater for years, you know, for most of my life, you know, it was a very comfortable place for me. And you know, this story is that, you know, I got into it, but I also wasn't comfortable at that point saying I'm a makeup designer for Broadway. So I hired myself to work on the show that I had designed so that I could have a full-time job. So it was a security blanket for me, and did that job for 7 years with, you know, things in between. But, and then realizing, okay, this isn't me, and got out of it. And it was doing Evolution with you and Michael that really sort of like pushed me to that next level, where I was like, yeah, I was like sort of stuck in this rut of doing the same thing over and over. And we talked about this, and it was one of the things that you said to me during it, you know, and it made me realize, okay, this, now I need to figure out what my voice is, who I am as an artist, what do I want to put out there.
Yeah. What is your aesthetic?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just one of those pieces of becoming an artist, becoming a person that I think we are not always allowed to explore.
No.
And I'm so repetitive in the things that I say and do because they have worked for me, but I've become obsessed recently. I think I talked about it in the last podcast too, with this song called Angel from Montgomery. And the idea of a couple being married for decades and being unhappy and trapped in their life. And like, I think I knew so many people, and I know so many people that just settled, that just said, this is what it is, and there's nothing else, and this is what I have to deal with. And I think I never wanted that. And when I started looking at artists who inspired me, who were game changers, who were influencers, who were influential, who became icons,
Yep.
what was the commonality was that there was something very special about what they put forward in their art. And then I talked about it today in a live. Abby and I went to the Georgia O'Keeffe exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum. And that was like the missing piece for me, because this exhibit was more about her clothing and her home and little things from her, you know, personal collections. And I realized that her aesthetic followed through everything she did, every little detail. And then about a few weeks later, I went down to Mexico City and I was at Casa Azul.
Ooh, I was just about to say that's the same thing that happened to me at Casa Azul.
Yeah, and when I was there, they had just unveiled all of these intimate pieces of her clothing and her makeup and things that had been hidden for years. And it was the same. I said, these artists had such strong aesthetics. And I think if you look at artists, if you look at movements, if you look at musicians, right? It isn't just surface for the most part, or for the people that I connect to. You know, it is definitely something signature in their style, in their writing, in their sound, in the way that they put paint on a canvas or touch clay. And I thought, this is what I want my life to be, and I've had success as a makeup artist. I don't ever diminish that, but like my legacy was not going to be a magazine cover or a music video. And so I had to really step back and say, well, what is it that I am passionate about that will push me forward? Because I honestly didn't want to be a 70-year-old artist rolling around a makeup kit. And so things like education and community, things like Rebels and Outlaws, like sharing these spiritual pieces of myself and being able to help other artists on their path and to find their voice became such a drive for me. And so then I had to take it a step further and say, well, why is it important to find your own voice? And how do you find your own voice? And that, I think, I remember that discussion. I remember standing next to you at Evolution and you being in your own way, in your own head. You were one of the most successful artists in the room, and you couldn't do the eye because you had so much doubt and so much. You knew how to do a design, but you couldn't let go and let the creativity kind of flow. I call it like that fire in your belly. You couldn't just tap into it at that point, and you had no discernible, recognizable style because you had always been designing for a client. And I think that was such a watershed moment for you. And it was so powerful for me because all of a sudden it unlocked this thing in you where the work that you did from that moment on was identifiably yours. It had your signature on it. And that for me was the important moment where I think it was such a point in our relationship too, where we were like, we have always had these parallel drives, and one of us will pick up a language or a tool or a skill and then share it with the other one. And so that for me was when I was like, okay, this works with early stage artists, definitely, but it also works with people who are very established, who are very in their success. And I don't know. And it's been a drive for me. I've been talking about it now for years. I go all over the world and I talk to artists about their signature style and finding their voice and their vision and how those things fit together.
I think there's also another level to it as well as, finding your style, yes, but also when we talk about finding your voice, it's about what is it that you want to put forward? What is this inside of you, or what is the message that you want to put forward? It's not always about, how do you do this eyeliner, or how do you do this eyebrow? Like, because that is your signature style, or the way that you do skin, that's your signature style. But it's also, what are you trying to convey through that? What is the message that you want to get through? Especially now with where we are, like, it's not just about doing a pretty makeup in the industry. It's about, having this voice, saying what you want to say, being able to stand by what you want to say, not only in your work, but also as an artist and as the person that you are, being able to stand up for these things that we have always felt, but always felt we didn't have the voice to be able to stand up for. And now we're going through this time where we can actually say, like with our families, with our friends, being able to say, no, this is not right. And this is what. So it's like, it's creating this whole different level now, which I love.
I think it's also getting older, like I have always found it easier to stand up for other people than to stand up for myself in a way. Like I've always fought for the little guy. I have always fought to make sure bullies are not, getting in the way of things. But I think when it came to myself, it was very easy to just kind of squelch it and silence it. And something about age or enlightenment or doing the hard work sometimes, has really brought me to a place where I cannot hold my tongue silent. I remember a poem called Pooled Beneath My Tongue. And it was like all of the idea that all of these words are there. And if you don't speak them, into action, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think there's also that idea of like big magic, that idea of like so many ideas are out there in the universe. And if you do not make it yours, if you don't manifest it, if you don't speak it into existence, it's just going to go on to someone else. And so then you can start to get stagnant and you can start to feel suffocated.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it is essential, especially for survival today,
Yeah.
when there's so many outside forces that we cannot control, to be able to share your stories, like a narrative, and to share your thoughts and to share your feelings
Yeah.
and to communicate clearly. And I think that opens you up in so many different ways. And my throat chakra, is the one that I deplete the most. I'm a teacher. I talk constantly. I am protesting. I am constantly speaking out for what I believe to be right. And so I also have to maintain my voice. And I think that's another part that a lot of people don't think about. Like, I constantly have to educate myself. I constantly have to check myself. I have to check my ego, which isn't easy for me. Because that can start to muddle your truth and your voice. And I think I've also learned that your voice is your power,
Mm-hmm.
and it's empowering, but you also have to think about the rest of the communication. Like, I am responsible for what I'm saying, but I'm also responsible for what people are hearing.
Yeah. And how you're saying it.
And how I'm saying it. Tone is a big thing for me. And most of the fights I get into with people are because I don't like the tone, And I know that I wield tone like a weapon. I know that I remember in college, like if I'm in a bad mood, it is
Everybody's in a bad mood.
for me to put everybody into a bad mood.
Yeah.
So I think your voice is powerful. And for people who are trying to figure out what comes next, for people who are trying to figure out how do I get through this moment, for people who are trying to figure out, like, can I survive this? I think being able to develop your own voice
Mm-hmm.
allows you to speak it into existence, say clearly what you need,
Mm-hmm.
what you're feeling, what you're thinking, which allows you to start moving forward. It is.
I think
So much
this has been a time where, it's a difficult time, and it's a time where, we're going through lots of things. We're going through the anxiety, we're going through the grief, we're going through the depression that we talked about in the last episode. But it's also a time where we have the time to think about these things. And, just as an example, our friend Bethany, who, has always been an artist and sort of cultivating this voice as an artist, and started doing these paintings and really just, and works a lot. So like doing these paintings on the side and sort of being able to do that, and now with this time has been able to nurture that artist and be able to take that artistry and create something and have a voice, with all of the experience that she has had, working with color, with what she's doing. And it's so amazing to see that sort of blossom.
Yeah.
This new voice of hers sort of come out.
And I think to see her voice come out and how that impacts other people.
Yes.
I think that's the other thing about your own voice that people don't necessarily place the value on, that is so important. Like, your sharing of your story, your speaking your truth impacts so many people. And I think a lot of people don't realize how one person changes a world. Like, I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
If I hadn't met you, I would not have I wouldn't have the life I have. I wouldn't have moved to Atlanta. I wouldn't have started working for Mac. I wouldn't have started doing makeup. I wouldn't have moved to New York. Like that one relationship, that one interaction, you know, if you hadn't spoken to me when we were 17 years old, what would my life look like? And then if I wasn't a makeup artist, what would the makeup show look like, or the powder group look like? So how many other people, I don't know, like I think that is the thing, like when you start to build it backwards and you realize how important other people's voices were in your life, that favorite teacher, that babysitter that gave you special interest, that favorite aunt or uncle, that story that you heard from, you know, an adult when you were young that made you believe in something.
Yeah.
A song, something as crazy as, like, you know, listening to Debbie Harry talk about CBGBs when I was a kid. That I knew I needed to do more, you know, and I think that if you stay silent and hold your tongue, who else is missing out on that magic, on that share, you know?
Yeah. It's like seeing all the club kids on Donahue or the Sally Jesse Raphael show or Joan Rivers, like seeing them and being in Rhode Island and seeing what these people were doing in New York and being like, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. And then finally saying, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. You know, and I think we don't realize that. We don't realize that the small things can affect people in major ways. You know, even just simple interactions, but it's about you using your voice and your truth and being real in who you are and having that connection with these people, whether it's just someone that you're meeting. You know, working in the retail store, there was a woman that came in, and this was the first time she had been out. And this was 2 weeks ago. This was the first time she had been out in public since we were quarantined in March. And because her husband was doing all of the food shopping. And so she came, and she needed this experience. And for me to be there that day and to be able to provide her with this experience and to be able to talk to her and be able to talk to her with my own voice and we talked about travel and, you know, how they want to like go RVing across the country. And I started telling her about all these amazing places, but that affected her so much that she sent a thank you card to the store. Like, you just don't understand how just being who you are and being comfortable and using your own voice, how it can affect people in such positive ways, you know, and just make people's days and make people like also think, you know, the discussions I've been having with my mom recently, like making her think of things in a different way that she would have never thought about, you know, before. And it's incredible to see that when you use the voice that you have.
I think that, like, the point with your mom, I think, is the other big piece. You know, I'm talking about artistry, I'm talking about yourself, I'm talking about how do you inspire other people around you, but the idea of educating people and changing their minds, I think we forget, right? Because right now they're like, everyone's just shouting and screaming all the time on Facebook. But I think that we forget how important just a dialogue or a conversation can be. And
Yeah.
like listening and speaking. And I think that is, okay, that's how people change and grow. And I think that that's such a beautiful moment to have with someone like your mom, who like has a huge heart, but maybe doesn't have the life experience that you have had.
Yeah.
And the more people tend to travel, the more cultures they tend to experience, the more food they tend to eat from different places, you know, the more relationships they have, the more people they meet. That changes you in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so when you are speaking, about these experiences and sharing these experiences, it has to affect people. Like, I think about the idea of homosexuality. There were no gay people on TV. We talk about it in like every episode. But also, there were people in my family that had never been a gay person. And so just the idea of saying, like, I'm gay and sharing my story with them takes away the vagueness of it. And all of a sudden it's actual. Like, you can't have the judgments about a religion, a race, a creed, a color, whatever, if you have an actual connection to someone in that. It takes what the vague unknown and it makes it very real. And I think that is something especially Americans need to experience. And so sharing your stories is the easiest way to change the world, I think. It's like,
Yeah.
I love hearing.
I agree, because I think that's one of the things that happened with my parents. And yes, they mellowed with age. But my dad, especially, like my dad growing up was very strict. And that's as far as I'll go. He was very strict. And not always so nice, but then as he got older and as I got older and started to be able to share my story with him, we had really great conversations. And we wouldn't necessarily have these conversations when my mom was around, because I don't think he felt comfortable, because he was brought up in that sort of, era where like men don't show their feelings. But we would have these conversations, and I think, just being able to be honest with him, to be able to tell him how I felt, to be able to tell him about my life. I always told my parents like where I was going, who I was going with. Like, I never hid anything from them. I told my mom everything. Every time I had a relationship that was going to be more than just like a night or a week. But I would talk to her about it, whether she wanted to hear it or not. And I think what happens is when you do that, you have to deal with the repercussions. You have to deal with the person maybe closing up a little bit and not being as receptive to what you're going to say. But what happens is over time, that person, it becomes easier for them to talk about it. It becomes more natural for them to talk about it. And, and I think that changes people. And it definitely, like, my dad has changed over time. My mom has changed over time. And I love seeing that change in them, and to have heard things in the past and now to hear what they are saying now. It is such a great thing to see how people can actually change. I think we want people to change overnight,
Right.
a lot of times, and it doesn't happen. But when you are truthful, and when the people know that you are truthful, sometimes you don't get the reaction right away that you want. But it sticks with them, and it stays with them. And eventually it starts to, change their thoughts as well. And I think that's something important to remember. I think we just want, everything has to be so instant, and that's not how it happens. People don't change overnight, it's a gradual change. And being honest about who you are and sharing that story with people, I think is really important.
Essential.
Yeah.
I remember my uncle, one of my favorite uncles before he passed away, like said, I hope I never said anything that hurt your feelings, because I just didn't know a gay person.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how I felt about it. And then I love you so much that it like changed the way I felt. And that's just one experience. I go back to queerness a lot because it's where I had to do a lot of work to find myself. But in any area of my life, dealing with my weight, dealing with my age, dealing with my career, dealing with relationships, stories shared change everything. And I just think it's like such small moments, a conversation with a stranger
Yeah.
can start a shift,
Yeah.
And I think like your parents are such a great example of some spending the time and investing in someone you love to be able to share so that they can expand their mind and live through your experiences
Yeah.
and through your voice, you know.
And to think about, like, throughout history, like, we've always told stories, whether they were true stories or whether they were fictional stories. But it's one of the things that has always linked us together as humans is telling stories. Like, it's always sort of brought us, like, telling stories around a campfire, you know, like telling histories of our family. You know, just today talking to my mom about you know, different things in our past and and in her past that I don't really know about, because when I was younger, that I didn't feel like that was important. And as I've gotten older, like, those stories are really important to find out where I came from, the people that I came from, you know, and not knowing that much about them. And so I think it's really important to share who you are with people now, and to be able to tell your story to people, to your children, you know, to your friends. You know, it does affect people's lives.
The reason we're doing this podcast.
Exactly, because all we do is tell stories. And on that note, let us finish up with something that has brought us joy. I guess I'll go first this week because you went
go
first. I mean, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you go first.
That was just a slip. That was a slip. So we're doing this a week after, but it's really 2 weeks after. So the thing that I was debating about what I was going to talk about that brought me joy. And there's lots of things that have brought me joy this week, but I think the thing that has brought me the most joy this week was so for some of you that know and some of you that don't know, my dad is not doing well and he's on his last days, although my dad is very stubborn, so his last days have now lasted 2 weeks. But my sister has been the primary caretaker for my parents and dealing with all of their stuff. And she had planned to go away with her husband, my brother-in-law, and my brother for a while now, before my dad went into the hospital. And I said to her, you should go, you need a break, because she's been working so hard. And
Sarah works hard.
She works very hard and she takes care of everything with my parents. It's
Everybody.
and everybody else. Yeah, she's basically my parents, what my parents used to be. Now my sister is. And which is amazing that she can do all of this stuff. And so my dad has been on morphine and Ativan, and part of that was when he would come out of the medication, he would start to get really agitated and belligerent and try to get out of the bed and you know, just being really aggressive. And so my sister called me and said, can you go and spend time with mom for the next couple of days while we're away, because I don't want her to be alone and she needs the support. And I said, yes, of course I can do that. And as hard as it was, and as hard as it was to see my dad like that, and to see him in the state that he's in, it brought me so much joy to be able to spend this time with my dad and with my mom, just to be there and to sit with them and to have these conversations with my mom, and to, you know, I sat there for, you know, over, you know, like 8 hours, would come in like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, stay till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And it was only a couple days, but it was just such a wonderful experience to be able to do that. And I think I felt guilty for so long about being the one that was away, being the one that was always traveling, the one that was always busy and couldn't always be there for all of the events and all the birthdays and all the holidays. And so I was happy that I could do this. And even though seeing him the way that he was hard, it just gave me such a good feeling. And I've been feeling so low lately about this, about, you know, the state that he's been in, and on top of all the other stuff. And this just sort of brought a high to my days, which is a strange thing to say when you're seeing someone who's dying and not the person that you remember them as, but being able to be there was so wonderful for me. So that is the thing that brought me joy.
I love that. I love that you're having those moments. You know, it's hard to be so far from you right now when I know everything's going on, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that you had those moments.
Yeah, me too. So what is your moment of joy?
Oh man. I think it seems very trite compared to your moment of joy, which is so major. Like you're dealing with a moment right now that is like circle of life kind of stuff, And I think for me, it has been more being in those small moments
Mm-hmm.
right now. Um, so I had this interaction this week where like I am every few weeks bringing a group of artists through a program called Mindful Action, and we just kind of discuss wellness in actionable ways. And so I had an interaction with an artist this week that was really powerful because I think that people are really struggling right now. I think that it's a time right now where people are feeling things they never thought they would feel and kind of tapping into strengths they never thought they would need. And so I had a conversation with an artist that honestly was in the middle of a million things. And I was trying to figure out how to make that moment happen. And I just made myself available. And it was kind of the shift in my mood to be able to say, okay, this is how we move forward. Small moment,
Mm-hmm.
small discussion about some personal things that they were dealing with. Just being able to listen and to offer advice. And so the moment was, I have learned in this pandemic to say to someone, do you need me to listen? Or are you asking for advice? And I know that's not monumental. I know that's not a game changer for a lot of people. But for me, because I think I'm very programmed to always try and find a solution for people, it was just this joyful moment where I kind of realized how I can relate to people and be there for them in the way they need me to be and not in the way I've been programmed to be. And that was such a special moment for me because I think that like this artist needed something pretty specific and I didn't bulldoze in the way maybe I usually do. So it was a moment of joy because it was like thinking that maybe there is some growth from my own work, but also this moment of joy because I felt like after this conversation, I could see the future a little more clearly and see how we're all getting through it. So,
Yeah. But I
yeah.
think also that's such an important thing for other people too, to ask. No one's ever asked, do you need, like whenever you call your friend, no one says, do you need me to listen or do you need me to give you advice? And I think, you know, sometimes you want to say, like, I need you to tell me what to do or what you think is right, but you're too afraid to. And just to have someone be able to say that to you then changes how you're going to relate and what you need to do. Because if you say that and someone says, I just need you to listen, it frees them to be able to just talk and not feel like, oh, I need to hear what they have to say. And I think that's such a powerful thing. I don't think it's trite at all. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and how amazing that you can actually, be able to do that for people.
And I think people are doing their best. Like right now, everyone's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And people are depending on people in different ways, and not everybody's able to reach out. And I think just knowing like that I can be there and be a better listener, or a better friend, or a better counsel or mentor or whatever it is, it was kind of a major like shift for me. It really made me happy. um I think I'm sure I've said it in the last like 5 podcasts, but I think I'm always good at speaking, but I'm not always good at listening. And so this is kind of like setting the expectations for myself. So it all even ties into like finding your voice.
Finding your voice, yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining us this week on Parallel Drives. I'm Joe DeLude II. This is James Vincent. We are here twice a month for you. You can catch us on any place that you can find your podcast, like iTunes, Buzzsprout, iHeartRadio. I just found out we're on Spotify.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't realize I had done that, but apparently I did. So you can find us on Spotify too. And then if you want to watch us, you can find us on my YouTube channel, which is Joe DeLude II, on YouTube. And join us in another 2 weeks, and we'll have another Blue Plate special for you and another topic. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Jane.
thank you guys. Thanks, Joe. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.